the Valley of Time, home of the Freedom Force. Isis, Hercules, Merlin, Sinbad, and Super Samurai. Join them now on another adventure, the Freedom Force.
Freedom Force, a superhero team built entirely out of spare parts. No, seriously. In 1978, Filmation looked at the superhero team blueprint and then reached into the junk drawer of its own canceled shows, grabbed a live action goddess it could no longer afford to film, a demigod whose own series just had died 9 months earlier, and three public domain myths sitting in a filing cabinet next to a legal memo. And it said, Team Freedom Force. In the fall of 1978, CBS dropped a 90-minute anthology block called Tarzan and the Super Seven onto Saturday morning. Seven super segments: Tarzan, The Adventures of Batman, Jason of Star Command, which was the only live action one, Manta Moray, Super Stretcher Micro Woman, Web Woman, and buried fifth on the roster, Freedom Force, a superhero team show that had ran exactly 5 episodes before it evaporated. But here's where we have to correct the record because the mythology around the show is so strong, it's basically its own episode. Some people will call Freedom Force Filmation's first superhero team. Technically, it isn't. In 1967, Filmation ran Justice League of America segments inside the Superman Aquaman Hour. Superman, Aquaman, The Flash, Green Lantern, same room, same problem. A decade earlier than in 1977, 9 months before Freedom Force, Filmation gave us Space Sentinels. Hercules, Mercury, and Astrea protecting Earth from inside a volcano. So, Freedom Force isn't the pioneer, it's the clearance rack re released. And that truth is the whole thesis. This show matters because it's assembled from leftovers, not despite it.
Isis, we're too late!
Now, as for the lineup, and this cast is the entire point, every single member was already somebody else. Isis. If you were a kid in the mid 70s, you knew her from The Secrets of Isis, the live action companion to Shazam. Joanna Cameron teaching science by day, invoking almighty Isis. The second trouble started. That show ended in 1976. By 1978, the character was still recognizable enough to trade on and cheap enough to animate instead of film, but with one caveat. Cameron didn't make the jump. They recast her with voice actress Diane Pershing, who would later go on to provide the voice of Dale Arden in the New Adventures of Flash Gordon. The show never mentions it, it just grafts a new voice onto your memory. Limbic System, meet production budget. Hercules. And here's where it gets properly weird. This is the same Hercules from Space Sentinels, the blonde, health obsessed demigod who was canonically the basis for the mythological Roman god. His NBC show ended December 1977. 9 months later, he's back in a new tunic on a winged horse named Pegasus, acting like nothing happened. They even swapped his voice actor. And since Hercules is the connective tissue here, let's actually give Space Sentinels a shout out for a second because the backstory is where the leftover thesis gets its teeth. Space Sentinels premiered in 1977, tail end of Filmation's Golden Saturday morning run, and it was pitched as exactly the kind of show you expect from a studio on a budget: 3 characters, one volcano, zero sets to build. And to keep it 100, the show itself was very progressive for its era. It had the full Filmation DNA, the same limited animation, multicultural characters, and the same spaceship interior turning up in the background of roughly 40% of the footage, no matter where the action's supposed to be. It ran 13 episodes quietly on NBC, and then it just stopped. No finale, no farewell, no cancellation card. One Saturday it was there, the next it wasn't. Which, for a show about three immortals, is a generally ironic way to die. But here's the catch, and it's the detail that makes Freedom Force feel less like a sequel and more like a hostage situation. When Space Sentinels got the axe, Filmation didn't mourn it, they just kept the characters in a drawer. 9 months later, when Tarzan and the Super 7 needed a fifth segment filled, they reached back in, pulled out Hercules, dusted him off, And this is the part that matters. Left Mercury and especially team leader Astria behind. One day Hercules was one third of a cosmic trinity, the next he's riding a winged horse alongside a magic carpet enthusiast and a giant samurai child pretending his old life never happened. You would think shared universe rehab tours are a modern intervention. Filmation did it in 1978 on a syndicated shoestring budget, and they didn't even bother to write the breakup. Merlin, master of magic, flies a carpet. Sinbad, hero of the seven seas, saddled with a comedy sidekick called Lamprey, because every 70s cartoon legally required one. And Super Samurai, alter ego of a young Japanese boy named Toshi who transformed into a giant warrior of justice. Yes, you heard that correctly. A small child is handed a giant samurai body and told to represent. It goes exactly as gracefully as you would expect. And to keep it 100, nobody ever explains what a living goddess needs with a magic stage show, or why Merlin is on the payroll when Isis already has element control. The roster reads like it was picked the way you chose toppings at a fading pizza joint, whatever was still in the walk in or drive through. The scripts confirmed it. 5 episodes, each one a different flavor of 12 minutes. Fight the thing. The Dragon Riders, two warring tribes who dogfight in the sky, and the team Broker's Peace. The Scarlet Samurai, a jealous kid and an evil wizard with a grudge against Toshi's father. The Plant Soldiers, a wizard steals the necklace of Osiris and builds an army of walking plants out of the Nile. Pegasus Odyssey, a sorceress kidnaps the flying horse for revenge on Hercules. And finally, the robot. An inventor's giant machine decides it's stronger than a whole team combined. It's not cinema by any sense of the word. It's a fever dream with a moral about sharing stapled onto the final 40 seconds. But here's where it gets even weirder. The voice cast is its own magic trick. Michael Bell, who would go on to voice Duke from G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, voiced Merlin, Toshi, and Sinbad. That's three of the five heroes, one man's vocal cords carrying 60% of the team. And you wonder why Merlin and Sinbad never seem to talk to each other in a scene. That's because the guy would have been arguing with himself, literally. The production was pure Lou Scheimer and Norm Prescott. Take the own library, remix it, keep the studio alive. And this is why 70s filmation has that look. The limited animation, the stock poses, the same pyramids showing up in the background of roughly 40% of the footage, regardless of location. They were running an animation studio and a recycling center simultaneously. If it moved, it got a second life. If it didn't, it became a background element. So, what does Freedom Force actually mean? Well, here's my honest verdict. Compared to the Space Sentinels, it's not a great show. At 5 episodes, it's barely a complete one, but it is a perfect fossil. The exact moment Saturday morning animation stopped pretending anyone would notice when you duct tape cancel properties and two myths into a team. And here's the catch: we did notice. We noticed so hard the thing became a cult object. It got a DVD release in 2006, crammed onto a disc with Space Sentinels, uncut, digitally remastered with creator interviews and trivia galleries. And then the label folded and it went out of print years ago. Or shall I say, decades ago? Which is the only proper faith for something this weird. Out of print, you literally cannot buy this show anymore. It has become a bootleg sales object in its own right. And that's the irony worth sitting with. Freedom Force was assembled from leftovers: a canceled goddess, a homeless demigod, a wizard, a sailor, and a giant samurai child. But that's what makes it a real team, not a team of equals, a team of survivors. Everyone on that roster was fighting to stay on television, and they fought the only villains that mattered: warring tribes, an evil wizard, a sorceress, a robot with an ego, and a budget that ran out after episode 5. Filmation looked at the mythology's starting lineup and said, "You know what Saturday morning really needs? A clearance sale." Freedom Force. Oh, Freedom Force. If you remember it, you probably caught it between a Tarzan rerun with an episode of Web Woman, half asleep, slightly confused, and fully entertained. If you enjoy exhuming shows like this, things that probably should have stayed buried but absolutely deserve an autopsy, stick around. Subscribe to Pulp Vision for more deep dives into the weird, forgotten corners of animation, television, and pop culture history. And if you want to keep the dust off these near lost relics, smash that like button as if you was the last samurai. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.